Color settings. Color settings. So what about color settings? How to customize color settings in Photoshop. How to customize the color settings in Photoshop. By the way, for most color managed workflows, it's best to use, by the way, a preset color setting that has been tested by Adobe, and changing specific options is recommended only if you are knowledgeable about color management and very confident about the changes you make. And by the way, after you customize options, you can save them as a preset, and the saving color setting ensures that you can reuse them and share them with other users or applications. And to save color setting as a preset, you should click Save in the color setting dialog box firstly, to ensure that the application displays the setting name in the color setting dialog box. And also you can save the file in the default location, by the way. And if you save the file to a different location, you must load the file before you can select the setting. And after that, to load as a color setting preset that's not saved, by the way, in the standard location, you should click Load in the color setting dialog box, and then select the file you want to load, and then click Open. Note here, please, and be careful and take care. In Acrobat, you can't save customized color setting, by the way. To share customized color setting with Acrobat, you must create the file in InDesign or Illustrator or Photoshop, and then save it in the default setting folder, and it will then be available in the color management, by the way, category of the preferences dialog box. And also you can add setting manually to the default setting folder. And what about color working spaces? What about color working spaces? By the way, a working space is an intermediate color space used to define and edit color in Adobe applications, by the way. And each color model has a working space profile associated with that. And you can also choose working space profiles in the color setting dialog box. And a working space profile acts as a source profile for newly created documents that use the associated color model. For example, if Adobe RGB in 1998 is the current RGB working space profile, by the way, and each new RGB document that you create will use colors within the Adobe RGB 1998 gamut. And working spaces also determine the appearance of colors is untagged documents. And if you open a document embedded with a color profile that doesn't match the working space profile, the application, by the way, uses a color management policy to determine how to handle the color data. And in most cases, by the way, the default policy is to preserve the embedded profile. And what about working space options? Working space options. To display working space options in Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign, you should choose Edit firstly, then choose color setting in Acrobat, then select the color management category of the preferences dialog box. And by the way, to view a description of any profile, you should select the profile and then position the pointer over the profile name, and the description appears at the bottom of the dialog box, by the way. And so what about RGB? RGB is meaning that determines the RGB color space of the application, and in general it's best to choose Adobe RGB, by the way, or RGB or sRGB rather than the profile for a specific device, such as the monitor profile. And sRGB is recommended, by the way, when you prepare images for the web, and because it defines the color space of the standard monitor, you can use to view images on the web sRGB. And sRGB also a good choice. RGB also a good choice, by the way, when you work with images from consumer level digital cameras, and because most of these cameras use sRGB as their default color space. And by the way, Adobe RGB is recommended also when you prepare documents for print, because Adobe RGB's gamut includes some printable colors and cyans and blues in particular, and that can't be defined, by the way, using sRGB. And Adobe RGB is also a good choice when working with images from professional level digital cameras, because most of these cameras use Adobe RGB as their default color space, by the way. So what about CMYK? CMYK is meaning that determines the CMYK color space of the application, and all CMYK working spaces, by the way, are device dependent, meaning that They are based on actual ink and paper combinations. And the CMYK working spaces Adobe supplies are based on standard commercial print conditions. And what about gray? Gray is meaning that gray Photoshop or grayscale Acrobat. By the way, gray by the way determines the grayscale color space of the application. And what about spot? Spot, if you use Photoshop, spot is meaning that specifies the dot game to use when displaying spot color channels and doodles. Note here please in this point and be careful. In Acrobat, if you use Acrobat, you can use the color space by the way in an embedded output intent instead of a document color space for viewing and printing. For more information on output and intents, you should to see Acrobat help. And after that, Adobe applications by the way ship with a standard set of working space profiles that have been recommended and tested by Adobe for most color management workflows. And by default, only these profiles appear in the working space menus. And to display additional color profiles that you have installed on your system, you should select advanced mode firstly if you use Illustrator and if you use InDesign, or more options if you use Photoshop. And the color profile by the way must be bidirectional, that is contain specifications for translating both into and out of color space, and in order to appear in the working space menus. Note here and be careful please here now. In Photoshop you can create custom working space profiles. However, Adobe recommends that you can use a standard working space profile by the way rather than create a custom profile. For more information, you should to see the Photoshop support knowledge base at adobe.com. And what about missing and mismatched color profiles? What about missing and mismatched color profiles? For a newly created document, the color workflow by the way usually operates seamlessly, and unless specified otherwise, the document uses the working space profile associated with the color modes for creating and editing colors. However, some existing documents by the way may not use the working space profile that you have specified. And some existing documents may not be color managed by the way, and it is common to encounter the following exceptions to your color managed workflow. And also you might open a document or import color data, for example by copying and pasting or dragging and dropping from a document that is not tagged with a profile. This often by the way the case when you open a document created in an application that either doesn't support color management or has color management turned off. And also you might open a document or import color data from a document that is tagged with a profile different from the current working space. This may be the case by the way when you open a document that was created using different color management setting or is scanned and tagged with a scanner profile. And in either case, the application by the way uses a color management policy to decide how to handle the color data in the document. And if the profile is missing or doesn't match the working space, the application by the way may display a warning message depending on options you set in the color setting dialog box. And profile warning are turned off by default by the way, but you can turn them on to ensure the appropriate color management actually of documents on a case by case basis. And the warning messages vary between applications, but in general you have the following options again here now. The first option recommended is meaning that leaves the document or imported color data as it is. For example, you can choose to use the embedded profile if one exists, and leave the document without a color profile, and if one doesn't exist or preserve the numbers in pasted color data. The second option adjusts the document or imported color data. For example, when opening a document with a missing color profile, you can choose to assign the current working space profile or a different profile by the way. And when opening a document with a mismatched color profile, you can also choose to discard the profile or convert the colors to the current working space by the way. And when importing color data, you can also choose to convert the colors to the current working space in order to preserve their appearance. So what about color management policy options? color management policy options. By the way, a color management policy determines how the applications handles color data when you open a document or import an image. And you can also choose different policies for RGB and CMYK images, and also you can specify when you want warning message to appear. To display color management policy options, you should choose edit, then choose color setting. And by the way, to view a description of a policy, you should select the policy and then position the pointer over the policy name, and the description appears at the bottom of the dialog box, by the way. And what about RGB and CMYK and gray? RGB and CMYK and gray is meaning that gray option is available for Photoshop only, and it specifies a policy to follow when bringing colors into the current working space, and either by opening files or importing images into the current document. You should choose from the following options. We have many options here now. The first option here, preserve embedded profiles, is meaning that always preserve embedded color profiles when opening files. This is the recommended options for most workflows because it provides consistent color management, by the way. And one exception if you are concerned and about preserving CMYK numbers, in which case, by the way, you should select preserve numbers, ignore linked profile instead. And what about the second option, convert to working space? Convert to working space is meaning that convert the colors to the current working space profile when opening files and importing images, and select this option, by the way, if you want to force all colors to use a single profile and the current working space profile. And the third option, preserve numbers. Preserve number is meaning that ignore linked profiles. This option, by the way, is available in InDesign and Illustrator for CMYK, and preserves color numbers when opening files and importing images, but still allows you, by the way, to use color management to view colors accurately in Adobe applications. And also should select this option if you want to use a safe CMYK workflow. And in InDesign, you can override this policy on a per object basis by choosing object, then choose image color setting. So what about off, and what's the meaning of off? Off is the meaning that ignores embedded color profiles when opening files and importing images, and doesn't assign, by the way, the working space profile to new documents. And also should select this option if you want to discard any color metadata provided by the original document creator. And what about profile mismatches? Profile mismatches is meaning that ask when opening displays a message whenever you open a document tagged with a profile other than the current working space. And also you will be given the option to override the policy's default behavior. And also should select this option, by the way, if you want to ensure the appropriate color management of documents on a case-by-case basis. And what about profile mismatches? Profile mismatches is meaning that ask when pasting displays a message whenever color profile mismatches occur as colors are imported into a document through pasting or dragging and dropping. And you will also and you will be given the option to override the policy's default behavior, by the way. And also should select this option if you want to ensure the appropriate color management of pasted colors on a case-by-case basis. The next option, missing profiles. So what's the meaning of missing profiles? Missing profiles is meaning that ask when opening and displays a message whenever you open an untagged document, and you will be given the option to override the policy's default behavior, by the way. And also you should select this option if you want to ensure the appropriate color management of documents on case-by-case basis. And what about color conversion options? Color conversion option is meaning that, by the way, the color conversions options lets you control how the application handles the colors in a document as it moves from one color space to another. And changing these options, by the way, is recommended only if you are knowledgeable about color and management and very confident about the changes you make. And also, to display conversion options, you should choose edit, then choose color setting, and after that select advanced modes if you use Illustrator and if you use InDesign, or more options if you use Photoshop. And in Acrobat, you should select the color management category of the preferences dialog box. And after that, engine specifies the color management module like CMM, and used, by the way, used to map the gamut of one color space to the gamut of another. And for most users, the default Adobe ACE engine fulfills all conversions, by the way, or conversion needs. And also to view a description of an engine or intent option, you should select the option and then position the pointer over the option name, and the description appears, by the way, at the bottom of the dialog box. We have many options here now. The first option, intent. What's the meaning of intent? Intent is if you use Photoshop, if you use Illustrator, and if you use InDesign. It's meaning that it specifies the rendering intent used to translate one color space to another, and differences between rendering intents are apparent, by the way, only when you print a document or convert it to a different working space. The second option, use black point compensation. Use black point compensation is meaning that ensures that the shadows detail in the image is preserved by simulating the full dynamic range of the output device. And also you should select this option if you plan to use black point compensation when printing, which is recommended in most situations. And the next option, use desire. Use desire Photoshop if you use Photoshop. It's meaning that controls whether to desire colors when converting 8 bytes per channel images between color spaces. And also when the use desire option is selected, Photoshop, by the way, makes these colors in the destination color space to simulate a missing color that existed in the source space. And also desiring helps to reduce the blocky or banded appearance of an image, and it may also result in larger file sizes when images are compressed for web use. The next option, compensate for scan. Compensate for scan rendered profiles if you use Photoshop only. It's meaning that compare the video contrast when converting from scan to output profiles, by the way. This option actually reflects default color management in After Effects, by the way. And what about advanced controls in Photoshop? Advanced controls in Photoshop is meaning in Photoshop you can display advanced controls for managing color by choosing edit, then choose color setting, and then selecting more options. We have options here now. The first option, distribute monitor colors by determines whether a distribute colors by the specified amount when displayed on the monitor. And when selecting this option, by the way, can aid in visualizing the full range of color spaces with gamuts larger than the monitor. And however, this causes, by the way, a mismatch between the monitor display and the output. And when the option is deselected, distanced colors in the image may display as a single color, by the way. The next option, blend RGB colors using gamma. Blend RGB colors using gamma. It's meaning controls how RGB colors blend together to produce composite data. For example, when you print or print layers using normal mode. When the option is selected, RGB colors are blended in the color space corresponding to the specified gamma. A gamma, by the way, of 1.0 is considered colorimetrically correct, and it should result in the fewest edge artifacts. And when the option is deselected, by the way, RGB colors are blended directly in the document's color space. And also when you select blend RGB colors using gamma, layered documents will look different when displayed in other applications than they do in Photoshop.